Hello, everyone. Welcome to join. Carlos, you are on mute.
Hello and welcome, everyone. We have more than 100 people from around the world. Thank you for joining this global investigative journalism network webinar about how Latin America connects to your story, investigating the region's global reach of illicit money, illegal mining, drug trafficking, and environmental destruction. My name is Carlos Eduardo Huertas. I am the director of Conectas. Conectas is an accelerator platform that has become a reference for investigative journalism in the Americas due to its committed to the journalistic collaboration for the production of in-depth stories that help expose the abuse of power, even in closed society, and for the analysis that allow improved understanding of the hemisphere. Today's webinar is tailored for investigative journalists who want to learn from colleagues who have unrevealed intricate webs of misconduct that start in Latin America but impact communities around the world. This session will delve into stories about deforestation, drugs, and mining, and provide relevant tips and tools from those exposes and how to pursue groundbreaking investigation in your own regions. From transnational criminal networks to financial maneuvers used to conceal illicit gains, that webinar will highlight recent investigations that have tracked illegally mining gold from the Amazon to India, for example, or cocaine from Colombia to European ports, and on Mexico, the hidden owners of offshore companies based in Panama and other Latin American countries. As journalists, understanding the methodology behind corrupt activities and learning how to better expose it is crucial for producing impactful transnational collaborative pieces. In this GIJN webinar, 4 senior investigative journalists will share lessons learned on how to work beyond borders on local stories about global issues. This webinar is part of GIJN's Latin American Focus Week, which is underway right now. You will find the link to related stories in the chat box. To begin, I welcome our panelists today. I say welcome first with Bianca Padro Ocasio. She is from Puerto Rico, but now is based on Peru. Bianca, welcome.
Thank you.
With Joseph Polisuk. He is from Venezuela, but now he's in Mexico. Joseph?
Yes. Hi,
Great.
guys.
With Lilia Saúl. She's from Mexico, and I don't know where are you, Lilia, right now?
In Mexico City. Yes.
Hi,
Always.
Lilia.
Hi, Carlos.
And Luis Fernando Toledo. She is from Brazil, and he is in Brazil now. Hi, Luis Fernando. Your
Hi,
camera
everyone.
is great. Your camera is off now.
I don't know what happened. Sorry. Hello.
Okay, great. Before we start, a little bit of information about the Global Investigative Journalism Network. For those of you not familiar with it, GIJN is the largest global network of nonprofit investigative journalism organizations with 250 member organizations in 91 countries. But it works with journalists everywhere in nonprofits, in commercial organizations, and with freelancers. It has an extensive range of resources and tip sheets and helps journalists worldwide, which you can check on GIJN.org. Before we start, I would also like to remind our audience that we have live interpretation from English to Spanish, English to Arabic, and vice versa. So if you would like to use this service, please, in the button in the Zoom screen and in the button, you can find the click of the interpretation and select the language that you prefer. We have about 90 minutes, and we also want to hear from you in the audience. Please send writing questions and message in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can. you can start asking questions right now. When the speakers are finished, Andrea Arzaba, who is our editor in Spanish in GIJN, will join us on the screen to moderate the questions. And finally, please note, we will be recording this session for posting later on YouTube. Okay, so let's start. We are going to start with Bianca. Bianca Padró Casio is an independent journalist working in both the US and in Peru. She's from Puerto Rico, and she is part of Ojo Público's cross-border investigation network. She contributed to Dirty Gold Routes, that is the latest investigative series of the new destination of gold illegally mining in the Amazon, which include 15 suspicious import companies in the US and the United Arab Emirates. Recently, for Ojo Público, she also contributed to OCCRP NarcoFiles project with a story on how illegal mining has become an increasingly important resources of income for armed groups, illegal armed groups in Colombia. Welcome again, Bianca.
Thank you everyone for joining from many different parts of the world, and to GIJN for the invitation for Ojo Público to kind of talk about how we did this investigation, and I'm happy to hear your questions and I'll do my best to answer them. So this is our series that published earlier this year. We call it Dirty Gold Routes, a decade of illegal mining and laundering from the Amazon. And I just wanted to kind of start first explaining what Ojo Público is. We are a journalism organization in Peru that was founded in 2014, and we do national investigative journalism and also cross-border or transnational investigative journalism, focusing on abuses of power and civil rights. And we have been awarded for our work in Peru and also abroad, and we also are considered the most widely read and influential investigative outlet in Peru, according to the Digital News Report, which has named us the most widely read in the past 4 years. So that's a little bit about us. And we do a lot of transnational investigative work with other outlets in the region particularly, but we are looking to expand. So I'm happy that we have people from other parts of the world. And if anything in the presentation sounds like something you would be interested in your country, please reach out and we'd be happy to connect. So a little bit about how this project came about. It was a collaboration between 18 journalists in 5 Amazon countries. In Peru, it was led by us in Ojo Público. We were joined by El Espectador in Colombia, Sumauma in Brazil, El Deber in Bolivia, and Revista Vistazo in Ecuador. And I just wanted to make it very clear that, of course, we were leading it, but it was a huge team with a lot of photographers and editors and data reporters. So, and people that helped us put together our website. So it was a big team that worked on this. So just for context, for those of you not familiar with the illegal gold problem in the Amazon, it is a growing problem, as a lot of my colleagues know. For context, in Colombia, for example, official figures show that up to 80% of the gold that is exported is estimated to be of illegal origin. In Bolivia, Peru, and Brazil, that's 30%. And in Bolivia, the gold has displaced natural gas as Bolivia's main export product. So this is the magnitude of the problem that we are talking about. And this is because gold is very easy to launder. And as the value of gold has increased in the past several years, especially as we've seen since the pandemic, the Amazon has become a hub or a hotspot for illegal gold mining because of the level of purity of the gold that can be mined from the rivers in the Amazon. And in the investigation, what we found was actually that the Amazon rivers that in the past were not, were not being taken over by illegal extractive industries have now become a greater part of this problem. So how this investigation started, it was in 2015 that Ojo Público first started looking at the laundering of money through illegal gold mining. And this was an investigation that kind of started it all for Ojo Público, and we wanted to reproduce the methodology that was used in 2015 so that we could figure out, okay, what are the new hotspots, where is this gold going, and what are the places where illegal mining has grown in our territories. What we found in this investigation, which took us 7 months to complete, was that between 2014 and 2023, almost a 10-year span, the Amazon countries exported more than 3,000 tons of high purity gold. And the way we did it was by finding the discrepancies between what countries formally declare to produce and what is finally exported. So whatever doesn't have a known origin, we consider to be suspicious and of suspicious origin, or illicit origin. And Peru accounts for the largest figure of this. So 92% of that discrepancy was actually gold that was exported from Peru. So among the new destinations, we found that India and United Arab Emirates are the two destinations that have been growing in importance in the region. It doesn't mean that in the 10-year span, it has displaced countries like Switzerland or the United States, but it just means that they are growing in importance, and they now import a greater percentage. And we found that a group of 15 gold suppliers that exported to these countries are linked to suppliers in our countries that have been investigated for illegal mining or money laundering. And what facilitates this laundering is that there are weak traceability capabilities along the supply chain. There are records that are faked locally. So people that are mining this gold will say that they got it from X place, on this date, but that doesn't actually mean that that's the case. And there are very weak local laws that can ensure that that's actually that is being fiscalizado. I'm sorry that I'm missing the word in English right now. And also that we see in countries like Ecuador and Colombia, where there are criminal organizations that have switched or moved on to illegal mining as a greater source of income, whereas before they were more dedicated to drug trafficking. So the data and methodology, I'll try to go through this very quickly. We use the 5 countries' custom records because the national gold export figures in general don't show the details on how the companies on the companies that are trading gold in the countries. And we compare them with the gold production figures for each country. So these are obtained through official sources. And we also access police files in Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia that shed light on the companies that are being investigated for illegal mining. And that helped us figure out what are the companies that are actually exporting and not, and there's no oversight as to their supply chain in the process. So for the gold, there's many different types of gold in the international harmonized system. So we focused on the 71.08, which is the following types of gold. We focused on this one because there were other types of gold in the harmonized system that relate to jewelry and things like that. And we knew that we wanted to just focus on, raw gold that is being exported from the countries. And we also traveled and did on-the-ground reporting in 7 different points in the region. So in Peru, we traveled to 3 different places, the Nanay River, Cenepa River, and we went to La Pampa, which has been a historical hotspot for illegal mining in the past decade. In Brazil, we went to Itaituba, and in Colombia, the Inirida River, in Ecuador, the Napo River, and in Bolivia, the Madre de Dios River, which is very close to the border with Peru. So this project took 7 months to be completed, and standardizing the data was the most challenging part. We did a total of 43 information requests, and we interviewed more than 30 experts and prosecutors, authorities. And I just wanted to make a note that Brazil and Bolivia for us were the most opaque countries in terms of access to information, and we had to significantly scale back the amount of information that we could investigate for these countries. So for example, a lot of the companies that we ended up publishing about are not from Brazil or Bolivia because their countries do not make public the names of the companies that trade in gold from Brazil and Bolivia outward. So these are a couple of different shortcomings that we had just based on the information that we could get access to. And just to kind of end on another important part of our investigation, we did focus significantly on what are the due diligence practices of these companies abroad? What are they doing and what have they changed in the past 10 years that wasn't being taken into consideration before? And you know, what are they doing to make things better, right? Because at the end of the day, the companies that end up selling the gold to companies like Apple or you know, Walmart or whatever, those companies have as much responsibility in the supply chain as the people buying the gold directly from the miner. So we looked a lot at what was happening there. And what we found is that a lot of companies, especially in countries like India, United Arab Emirates, do not have a very good due diligence process and compliance offices. And we also looked at what the countries that we were based in we're doing to also improve the due diligence process. And we found that in Colombia and Peru, these authorities have shifted a little bit from, you know, mining crackdown to money laundering investigations that could be linked back to illegal mining. And I just wanted to end.
Bianca.
Yeah, bye. Well, I'm done. This is just a photo of Madre de Dios, and just to look at pretty much how the ground is looking right now with the illegal mining problem. And this is all illegal mining from what's seen in the picture, and the devastation and deforestation that it also causes as an environmental crime. So thank you so much, and I'll be looking forward to your questions.
Great, thank you, Bianca. I just want to underline how Ojo Público's follow up and their own investigations 10 years ago, and how they cross and the combination of information, first for custom records, second for gold production figures and policy files, no? And the combination of these databases helps to expose something really big, and how the investigations can reveal something that happened in very close systems like India and United Arab Emirates. We are going to continue with Joseph. Thank you, Bianca. Joseph Polisuk is editor-in-chief and co-founder of Armando.info, a trailblazing news website dedicated to investigative journalism. Joseph leads a team of intrepid reporters who have produced major investigations revealing financial misdeeds and corruption in Venezuela. Take in mind that everything related with corruption in Venezuela is hundreds, thousands of millions of dollars, no? Which has been ranked one of the 10 most corrupt countries in the world, according with Transparency International. Joseph, 10 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, Carlos, thanks a lot, and thanks a lot to GIJN for this invitation to permit us to show part of the work that we are doing in Armando.info, that, as you said, is the only media dedicated exclusively to the investigative journalism in Venezuela. And I came with a collage of cases in order to show what we are doing. Let me share my screen just a moment. Before of telling and showing you some cases, this is the map of the corruption, the last map of transparency, international transparency. And you can see that we in Latin America live in a region very corrupted. It reminds me, look at the point of Venezuela, deep red. So it reminds me when we participated in the Panama Papers, the Panama Papers could be a mirror of the world. I remember that the Russian colleagues found some companies of a proxy man of Putin. And at the same time, there was a very interesting story about an offshore company of that was involved in war crimes in Syria. And we in Latin America, we found mainly corruption. We found some politicians of Venezuela that were hiding their money in the offshore, in tax havens. And I remember as well that some cartels, some mafias of drug cartels of Mexico were discovered through those tax havens. But in some cases, we think that the corruption is just for hours. And what we have seen in the last time is that some of our money at the end up in Europe and in the so-called North Global. So let me show you an example. This is a case, thanks to the FinCEN files, we could prove that the money that was invested or that was going to build the line 5 of Metro de Caracas at the end finished in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. So if here in the audience, there is a Dutch colleague, we need you. We have tried to find this money, and at that time, we haven't had answers. Anyway, the flow of the money went to Amsterdam through Antigua y Barbuda, a tax haven in the Caribbean. I am going to tell you more after that, but before of that, we are investigative journalists, so how we do our work. Remember that Venezuela don't have Freedom of Information Act. We don't have even press conference. The government don't give even official figures about COVID, even the population. We don't know right now how many Venezuelans we are. So I think that we have three main methodologies. Networks, data and tech, and traditional journalism. It's not going to death anymore. So we triangulate information. If there is information that is not in our country, we can look for it outside with custom records, bill of landings, important export databases, things like this. At the same time, networks, teamworks. I mean, talking about Panama Papers, things like this. And if there is an information that we cannot find in our country, we can look for allies outside. Interviews, of course, I am telling you that traditional journalism is not going to death. So it's important, a term that we usually refer and call widows of power. These people that was in the place, and we can find them in order to find the information. Judicial court documents, things like this, leaks as well. And thanks to a leak, we finally found some transactions, some transferences that went from Antigua y Barbuda, this bank of the Caribbean, to Switzerland. And there we saw that it was deposit, some deposits, 67 deposits of Petróleos de Venezuela. We found this in the FinCEN files that were documents from the U.S. Treasury's Financial Crimes Informant Network. And there we found these transferences. Anyway, we didn't know, we could know that the company that received in Switzerland this money was involved in another case that 5 years before we were covering in the Odebrecht scandal. I don't know if you know, but Odebrecht scandal was one of the most important cases of corruption in Brazil, mainly in Brazil. It began in Brazil with a company of construction that paid bribes even to prime ministers, presidents, and 2 ministers in order to get the best contracts and the best contracts of the region. It began in Brazil, but it was also in other 12 countries, mainly of Latin America. So with the support, or it was an alliance between some journalists and regional media, like IDL Reporteros in Peru, Sudestada in Uruguay, La Prensa of Panama, and La Nación of Argentina. In Brazil, it began in the judicial power, but in the other countries, we didn't have access to this information. So we joined experiments in order to find some information. And because of this, we could see 5 years before of the FinCEN files that this company was involved, in receiving, was a vehicle in order to get this money. But 5 years later, thanks to other leak, we could see that the money arrived to Switzerland. So Switzerland and the Netherlands. So see that the corruption began in our countries. Nobody steal money in Caracas in order to deposit this in the bank. But I think that the investigative journalism, basically, we don't cover a source. We don't follow a source. We have to prove methodologies and hypotheses. And it's important to understand how the world works. And sometimes
one minute,
we don't.
Joseph.
Sorry?
1 minute more.
Okay. Okay. This is one. Look the flow of the money. The first document is from Brazil, the Bank of Antigua y Barbuda, you can see here. And then we found this money in Switzerland. And at the end, we found that Switzerland permitted to a Brazilian guy involved in this drama. They showed us how the money finished. Look at this, in South Boston, in the bank accounts of the son of Eusenando Acevedo, that was the Brazilian guy involved in this story. Yes, I think that we can finish here.
Thank you so much, Joseph. I just want to underline, how the traditional techniques are very useful to connect information around the world, how Armando Info triangulate information and connect custom records with bill of landings and court documents, to understand how the business works. Thank you, Joseph. Before I'm going to continue, remember that in the Q&A box, you will send the asking questions. And at the end, Andrea Arzaba, who is our editor of GIJN in Spanish, she's going to moderate the questions. And in the chat box, you can see the links related with the presentations. Well, great. We are going to continue now with Lilia Saúl. She is an investigative reporter with OCCRP. She's based in Mexico, and she's an award-winning journalist with more than 50 years of reporting experience. She was editor in Conectas too, and in 2023, she was part of the team that worked on NarcoFiles, on the global spanning business on drug trafficking. Lilia, thank you. 10 minutes.
Yeah, this is a NarcoFiles project, and thanks a lot for having me, and thanks for Global Journalist. And I will introduce you to the NarcoFiles project coordinated by OCCRP. If you don't know, which is organized, OCCRP is Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. We are a global network of journalists, and I am based in Mexico City. And I have the honor of showing the great work of so many journalists who participate in this transnational investigation. And only show the images because it's not the sound, but it's a little video. And well, maybe I can, how we did it. NarcoFiles, the New Criminal Order, is an international investigation into the current situation of organized crime and those who fight it. This collaboration, which include more than 40 media outlets, is the largest research project on this topic born in Latin America, a region hit by drug trafficking, as well as associated violence and corruption. In this project, show how criminal groups operate, how they collaborate with each others, and innovations in criminal practice. This project originated in a leak from the Attorney General Office of Colombia. And you know, in the past the years, have different leaks about of Colombia and Mexico at the same time. And the secrets can be to realize this project because they share the data with OCCRP and other outlets and other organizations. But what's the challenge for works with this leak about a lot of information? Well, at first time, confirmed the authenticity of the leak, 7 million emails from the Colombian prosecutor's office. Reporters compared the data with public information, for example, says, or looking for reference numbers of court cases, property or companies' data, among others. And obviously contains sensitive materials like, for example, video. And that's information never used because it was a very sensitive material. In addition, they sent more of 100 of requests for public information, reviewed 100 of public and private documents, databases, and interview authorities and criminals and experts on victims of drug trafficking. And well, it's a very, very great challenge for OCCRP because it was an organized collaborative ecosystem. As I say, 40 media outlets, 23 countries, and the coordination was big response for OCCRP and CLIP, the organization too in Latin America. That's all the outlets to work with us. If you can see, it's a lot of outlets, media by Latin America, but in Europe too, and United States, and that's all the outlets you can see. Well, 6 main themes were explored in NarcoFiles. Criminal empires, global criminal expansion, narcos, SA, criminal innovation, ports, very important, discover different issues about of the ports in different parts of the world, dark money, financial flows, eco-crimes, and police and thieves. And well, some findings in our stories. A son of a drug trafficker in the shark fin export venture, a narco shareholder in a strategic port in Colombia, the expansion in the United States of the Venezuelan band Tren de Aragua, which has had an expansion on the continent. You can see the images by the CNN because they made like a documental, very, very, very important to see. If you can see, and the relations of the Italian mafia with banana exports, the expansion of coca crops beyond the traditional areas like Colombia, and how drug lords live in Dubai, or how drug cartels in Mexico have multiplied their presence in South America and Europe, and offer service as brokers to promote the export of drugs to distant countries like Australia. It's very funny to see, like in this map, funny in this case, for example, find a man to sell tequila, the bottles of tequila with methamphetamines, meth, for distribute in Australia, for example. And well, or in this case, for example, shows the different dots of connects of different in different countries by the same criminal groups to work together for laundry money, for make different drugs in laboratories. For example, in this case, in a rural Dutch village. And in the connection between the different countries can see or prove with the documents for the prosecutors of Colombia, but in our investigation. Well, and another criminal innovations, for example, the criminals use encrypted communications, like the police in different countries, or the Interpol services, and that's all the different things to know now. And how do we build the collaboration? The project was collaborative from the beginning, plus we wanted to go in depth with the investigations, use different infrastructure, make rules, communication, coordination, organize. OCCRP is a global network, and that's the best for us, because can work with colleagues in Netherlands or in Spain, or even in Emiratos Árabes, or in Mexico, in Colombia, or different countries. Use different tools, like you can see Alep. It's a beautiful and amazing tool for us, for all the journalists. If you don't know, you need to know, because it's all of the data sets and different documents. You can find it, and very useful for us to do the investigations. Well, different challenges faced: collaboration, climate, cross-border issues. For example, in my case, I'm in Mexico, but sometimes to speak or to try to collaborate with another colleagues from other countries exist at different time, some different hours to work, or the people have a lot of work in a different outlets, media, and needs to put in different moods for continue to collaborate. And well, obviously have a security different topics. For example, a digital side, a physical side, and editorial side. For example, in our experience, the physical side is very important because, for example, for the colleagues to see the videos for the lead, it's a very worst thing to do, because the videos was a very content violence, content issues that difficult to hard to see them. Digital side, because all of the journalists, investigative journalists, knows about of the threats and need to use different tools like VPN or PGP or Signal for communications. And it's very important to sign, for example, an NDA for cover all of us, and that's all the work to do. And editorial side, because it's very important to have a coordinate. At OCCRP, we agreed to have a project leader. In this case, it was Nathan Jacquard, or editor for Latin America, and security coordinator, like David Gonzalez is a coordinator too in Latin America region, and have a different manage to all the information for security reasons. And a clear protocol, inductions to the journalists for understand all the different topics to involve in these investigations, and obviously have a security commit, because, for example, if you have in risk or feel to risk, or if you have receive a email for exchange email, you can to talk with us, and goes to maybe to know about of more information if you have, or maybe you're still in risk, and that's all the continue to work. That's the reason I think, OCCRP and different outlets continue for several months to work because it's not too easy to coordinate and work with security and find the different investigations. And the most important, when final days of this investigation needs to do a different rights of response, because needs to talk with criminals and lawyers and prosecutors, and that's very important to feel safe and to communicate all the information, sensitive information. And well, challenging reporting, if it's very common, I don't know in other countries, but in Latin America, it's very difficult to have access of different documents, like in Mexico or Colombia. And FOIA requests, it's very hard to obtain important documents, or in a little weeks to obtain the documents, and obtain answers to the public service public, because sometimes it's preferred to keep in silence. Organized journalists from Latin America, Europe, and the United States with the same objective, in our case, break down the blockage that exists from judicial source in different Latin America countries, address the secrecy of information and the risk of reporting in dangerous sites taken over by organized crime. It's important to say about that because, for example, in one case in Mexico, obviously, it's very, very hard to do reporters goes to fields, because it's very dangerous and it's not safe to do the reporting in different states in Mexico. Drug traffickers and organized use new techniques for even for knows about of the information to cover, for example, in this case, for journalists in different outlets, media. And well, about the conclusions, drug traffickers and organized crime in general use new techniques and tools, as well as innovative communications, to continue increase their business, no matter the rivalries at a transnational level. They are part of a large company with the same objective: to distribute drugs, to launder money, and to obtain multi-million-dollar profits. And well, if you have any questions, you can write me or maybe say something in this chat. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Lilia. This is an amazing work around the world, originated in Latin America. And before we're going to start with Luis Fernando, do you remember in the Q&A chat box in the bottom of the screen, you can find and send your questions. Andrea, she will moderate the questions after Luis Fernando Toledo. Luis Fernando is a Brazilian investigative and data journalism. He leads datafixers.org. It's a non-profit organization specializing in data and public records to support investigative journalism, and he is the former director of ABRAI. And in 2023, he was part of a global team that used data to interrogate green claims, resulting in an impactful investigation called Deforestation Inc. Welcome, Luis Fernando, and you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so thank you for the presentation. Thank you for having me in this presentation. I'm going to talk about Deforestation Inc., this project with more than 35 newsrooms across the world. It was coordinated by the International Center of Investigative Journalists. In this specific presentation, I'm going to focus on the Brazilian part of the story. So the main goal of this project was to assess if these environmental certifications are actually accurate. If the companies that hold environment certifications are not destroying forests in other countries, are not committing environmental crimes in other countries. And we found that in several countries, they are doing really, really bad. Like the owners of some of these companies are arrested were arrested for environmental crimes, and the company still holds a certificate. So we worked with actually 39 media partners. In Brazil, we had 3 media partners: Revista Piauí, Piauí Magazine, Agência Pública, and Poder 360. In Brazil, we analyzed one specific environmental certificate called FSC. In their own words, it's called the Forest Stewardship Council, an international no-government organization dedicated to promoting responsible management of world forests. They were founded in 1994, and they are pioneers. So their main goal is to make business and consumers to choose wood, paper, and other forest products made with materials that support responsible forestry. So if you are buying something from a company that holds an FSC certificate, you can be sure that you are doing business with someone who is not committing environmental crimes. At least that's what they say. So we found this database online where you can see all the companies that hold this certificate. We scraped that database and we divided. Every country had their own Google spreadsheet. And starting from that, in Brazil, we have, we are very fortunate in Brazil because we have access to all the environmental sanctions made by the Brazilian government. It's available online. And I invite you, if you are interested in looking up a company from your country that has some business in Brazil, it's very, very useful because you can find the company's names, you can see a description of the environmental crime that they did, when it happened, if they have been sanctioned or not, how much money was they had to pay in that specific case for the government. So our idea in this project was to cross-reference these 2 databases. So if I have a FCC certificate, I shouldn't be on this database because I wouldn't be a green company. I wouldn't be sustainable. So what we actually found was like 300 different, many companies that were actually in that database. So they committed several environmental crimes. The next step was to send FOIA requests to get access to the specific documents where we wanted to see details of each environmental finding. In the database I just mentioned, you can see just like data, you cannot see like details. But if you send a FOIA request, you can get pictures, you can get specific details from the person from the government agent who was in the field. So you can see things that are very important when you are going to write your story. Then we published the story explaining the most relevant cases, the cases that were more harmful to the environment. We found several environmental crimes in companies that had the FSC certification. Land grabbing in indigenous lands, illegal deforestation. One thing that we found very interesting was that several companies had been fined 10 times, 15 times. There was one company that was fined like 30 times for years, not just one case. It was not an exception. It was almost like their pattern. They are always committing environmental crimes to make profit. One of those guys that we found was arrested because for environmental crime, which is something very, very rare in Brazil because the environmental law here is people pay fines, but they are not arrested. It's not considered like a serious crime. So it's very, very rare, but we found one person that was arrested for that. And we also found several fraud schemes, including timber laundering. One thing that I think Lilia already mentioned Aleph. I think this is a very useful database, even in Brazil, to look up environmental fines. We have a partnership between OCCRP and ABRAGE, the Brazilian Association of Investigative Journalism. So if you want to look up a company from your own country, you know that this company has some business in Brazil, in the Amazon region. There are two ways where you can do that. Maybe you can just go to Aleph and look up for the company name, because the data is in this platform. And you can also look up in the IBAMA government website. I'm going to show the link in a minute. One other thing that I think it's important to mention is that in Brazil, we have a very strong FOIA. So and it works for this kind of project. So you know that a company was sanctioned for doing illegal deforestation or land grabbing, things like that. You can send a FOIA request to IBAMA, the environmental agency in Brazil, and within 30 days you are going to receive a copy of the document you requested in your email. In this project, we received like 50 different copies of different cases, and they denied like 2 or 3 because the cases are still like being appealed on the courts, things like that, so they couldn't send us. And I think one very important lesson here is that sometimes companies are green, and they do lectures in Europe and the US talking about how sustainable they are, but people don't know that here in Brazil they are doing several harmful environmental crimes in not only in the Amazon region, but also in other regions. So if you want to download this data, you can also go to the IBAMA website, and it's just one CSV file. It's very easy to explore. You can just look up the name of the company that you are interested. Sometimes if they have a Brazilian company, the name could be a little bit different, but you can find that easily on Google, and then you can start your investigation from there. That's what I have. Thank you.
Great, Luis Fernando. I just want to underline how, an effective way to collaborate across borders is through data sharing, and how, in this case, was very key to obtain good results and to identify the best partners, Well, I invite Andrea Arzaba. She is our editor of GIJN in Spanish, to join the screen to moderate the question. We have a lot of questions now. But before give you the word, Andrea, I would like to inform that Conectas has an open registration for a free virtual course about how to investigate environmental crimes in the Amazon. This course is focused in Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia. And the course is meant to provide tools for everyone who are interested in investigating this topic in these countries. I will leave the registration link in the chat box. And Andrea, please go ahead.
Thank you all. So thanks everyone for all of the questions that you have shared. We will have 2 rounds of questions. So in the first round, I'm going to mention specific questions for each of the speakers. And then in the second round, I will ask general questions that I would like everyone to answer. And these are all questions from the public. So thank you once again to the audience. So I'm going to start with Bianca. So Bianca, some of the questions for you are, how did you protect yourself during the investigation from armed groups and also other parties involved in the gold mining? Like, can you talk about how you protected yourself or just people reporting from your team? Then, which countries of the EU play the most important role in the illegal mining industry? Are the Emirates an intermediary to wash the gold to later export to Europe, for example? If you can give some insights of what you learned. And then if you can shed any light on what kinds of information requests you placed, asking for what, to what authorities, and if you got refusals, did you reward any request? So these are the 3 questions to start with you. Then we're going to go to Joseph. So Joseph, did you work with whistleblowers? Do you have any methods or any tips for that? Second question, if there is no press freedom in some of our countries, for example, for you, Venezuela, how do you reach the audience, or who is your audience for the topic like corruption? Are you thinking more of a local audience or the international community? Can you talk more about audience? And then the third one, how did you follow the money from Venezuela to Amsterdam? If you can give some tips on that. Then for Lilia, what links have you uncovered between transnational drug smuggling and human trafficking? If you can talk a little bit about those issues. And also you can mention the security protocol when you cover drug trafficking in a collaboration, not only personally. And then the last two questions for Luis. Luis, how do you identify the best partners to collaborate? And also, what do you suggest to a young reporter that wants to start investigating the issues you mentioned? So I'm going to start with Bianca, please.
Thank you. So the first question on safety, yes, this was quite complicated, and when we were deciding where we were going to go, we based a lot of our decisions on what are some of the reports from NGOs that are looking into illegal mining, what are some of the authorities like the OAS, what new places are they looking at that where illegal mining has become a growing problem. And from there we reached out to a lot of these NGOs and asked them about the access, how easy is it to travel to a certain area. And from there, we reached out to local community organizations or indigenous organizations that are in the hotspots where we were going to go. We had a couple of places where we were planning to go that we ended up eliminating from our list because of safety issues, because we knew that either it was going to be inaccessible, like it was going to be too difficult, I don't know, like 10 hours by boat, and then you have to take charter plane, and it was going to be too costly, or because we knew just from talking to organizations and advocates and authorities as well that these areas are very dangerous. And I think someone mentioned it in the comments, but of course illegal mining has all these other crimes attached to it. It's not just the illegal mining, it's the trafficking of people, it is trafficking of women, it is child labor, it is deforestation, it is drug trafficking. So there are all these other very dangerous situations that converge in areas where illegal mining takes place in the Amazon. So we took great care in making sure that the places that we were traveling to were going to be the safest possible. But we also wanted to make sure that we could go to places that were new and were not had not been as written about in the press. There are parts, for example, in the Peruvian Amazon where indigenous people are cohabitating with illegal mining on a daily basis. And we didn't want to just say, okay, we're not going to go there because it's too dangerous, because there are people living there next to illegal mining every day. So that was something that was part of our rationale. And I will also say, I was in the team that went to La Pampa, and La Pampa is this place where illegal mining has been happening for over a decade. And the safest way that we could go in was with prosecutors. And that was the only way that journalists could go in without, exposing ourselves to great risk. So we actually went with authorities and prosecutors to the areas where we knew illegal mining was happening. So we had to make some concessions that maybe in another situation you would say, oh no, like you don't go with authorities, but that was not necessarily the calculus in this situation. The other question, so about the EU, the EU has made greater efforts to try to address some of the due diligence problems that these companies have had in the past. But what we have seen, and again, if there's anyone from Dubai or someone here who would like to collaborate in the future, I would love that, because what we found was, in fact, that the UAE is becoming an intermediary for a lot of European companies. And that's because, as we know, the UAE does not have great due diligence laws, or you know, companies that operate there do not have great due diligence processes, or you know, they're not compelled to do so. So it has become a place where illegal gold from the Amazon, but also from the DRC, from Sudan, is going to the UAE and then being imported into Europe. And this is a big problem. And this is something that advocates and lawyers talk about constantly. You know, it's not that miners in the Amazon are saying, okay, well, we're gonna legalize ourselves so that we can sell to the US or we can sell to Europe. They're saying, I'm going to sell to the UAE so that, you know, this gold is good. I'm not going to have any problems for it to be laundered and entering the formal markets in Europe or the US. So that's definitely something that we saw happening a lot. And just in terms of quickly public records, so we asked for a lot of different records from especially the mining authorities in our countries. And actually, as Luis Fernando was saying, a lot of the FOIA, some of the FOIA laws are pretty good in Peru and in Brazil. They are, you know, they're very responsive, and there's very strong laws where, you know, within 10 days, they have to get back to you or acknowledge your request. In some cases, we did have to rephrase, but what we asked for was above all on investigations that authorities are conducting on specific companies or, you know, or miners locally. And some of that included seizures, for example, you know, how much has been seized in a period of time, what are the companies that were implicated, where are they based? But a lot of it was also just trying to get as many figures as we could, you know, how much was actually exported. In Brazil, like I said, we couldn't find the names of the companies, so we had to go to many lengths to find as you know, the best figures that we could to show this is how much is being produced and this is how much is being exported. Because if we looked at just, you know, what it looked at on the surface, it looked like Brazil was not really exporting a lot of gold of suspicious origin, but we know that's not the case. So we had to go through university studies. We had to go through, you know, what surveys are researchers doing. We had to use a lot of different sources to combine them and analyze them ourselves, and figure out how to give the best picture possible. But, you know, this is not at all a complete picture, right? Because, for example, we had to use the harmonized code 71.08 to narrow down the investigation as much as possible. We know, for example, that, you know, these companies that are operating in the UAE and India, that, you know, there's records that we don't understand there. So, you know, there's definitely a lot of holes and gaps that we didn't fill, but that's the general idea.
Thank you so much, Bianca. Joseph?
Yes, thank you, Andrea. The first question about the whistleblowers, I am going to brief in two ways. First of all, as I said, I think that investigative journalists, we don't cover a source, we don't follow something specifically, but we have to prove and to find an hypothesis and to find the best way in order to prove it. We don't say in that way, but we are experts in methodologies. So in some way, whistleblowers are necessary. They are key, sorry. Anyway, we have used in some other cases artificial intelligence, for example, in order to pinpoint, thanks to satellite imagery, to pinpoint illegal mines and clandestine airstrips, things like this. But in some other cases, you need these people. So how can you find these people? And I think that one of the best things to be a journalist is to live and to exercise some careers. In some ways, you are a social scientific if you are going to use data journalism or precision journalism. But in other ways, you can be an actor and a detective and also a psychologist. And you have to understand why, who is this guy, and how you can tackle him and abort and to get the best information. Usually, before to approach them, I am accustomed to look his or her social media in order to see his circle and also to see if there are people in common between us. About the audience and how we manage these, because first of all, you have to know that for sure in Caracas right now, the capital of our country, some people maybe in the West, they have access to our webpage, but in the East, at the same time, maybe we have a sophisticated censorship. So maybe they cannot access to our webpage. And it's a challenge because it's not just about to get the best information. I think that a good journalist have to have an audience, and it has affected also our business model. Imagine, in the country of the highest hyperinflation of the world, how can we sustain an operation with that situation? So we use a lot social media in order to put the information there. And as it is changing always, so we are changing the strategic in order to put the information to the public. And I have to say thank you to our team, to our social media team, and our partners that are in charge of this task. Talking about the case of Amsterdam, how the money arrived to the Netherlands, it was just an example in order to, for us in Latin America, Europe is one of the most ordered and best place in order to fight against the corruption. And inside Europe, the Netherlands, it's a good country, but we are accustomed in Venezuela to that the authorities close the doors in our faces. So the FIOD, the prosecutor office of the Netherlands, have done the same. And I am sharing with you our surprise in order to see how the world works really. Yes.
Thank you, Joseph. Lilia?
Yes, about human traffic. There are many links, but difficult to prove because organized crime uses even ordinary people to traffic people without knowing that these people are working even for organized crime leaders. A clear example is that of the so-called polleros, who in Mexico are dedicated to charging migrants who use a bus to reach their final destination to United States, usually. They just receive the money and give it to a person they don't know nor want to know who they work with. And that's the question. It's very difficult. And the videos I was talk about the videos show different topics of the human trafficking, and it's even the prosecutors can't follow the origin of the organized crime in these cases. I want to answer about the question about the privacy and data protection, because it's very important to say about in NarcoFiles, we were very carefully with the issue of privacy. We only published information on people who were already convicted or sentenced. And in most cases, what we saw was to show the mechanism and process that organized crime groups now carry or rather than to share for or resolve on unfinished investigation case. Because the most important thing we must remember as investigative journalists is that we are not authorities, nor the police or the prosecutor. And in our cases, or in the investigations, it's about of show the network, the connections, and sometimes the names of these people are very anonymous because it's not the top level. And in the case of the public investigations, the top levels are published, but the names are of the very, very known criminals nowadays you very know in the different news. And another questions I see about of the tips from personal safety, I can answer too, because for example, in our case, in OCCRP, it's very important to the security, because all the journalists is very important for us, and maintain constant communication with editors between reporters. It's the first advice to can I say. Do not do any reporting in the field without warning. For example, in our cases, send like a schedule, and hour by hour, I need to say I stay in a coffee station or in a park, and I interview with that person, and come back to my home, and this is my security number, and that is my number of my family if I have in dangers, and all the information as I possible to have, because it's very important for all of us. And do not see any source without others knowing that you are going to interview someone, because it's very common for, I don't know, young journalist or any without experience. Oh, I see a source, and no one any knows, and it's very dangerous, because you need to cover your back. You need to other people say knows about of you interview with another person, and in particular, last, do not comment even with other journalists outside of the investigation about your work, because it's very important to cover only between the journalists to participate in this investigation. And maybe for me, that's all.
Thank you, Lilia. Finally, Luis.
Okay, so the first question was how to find best partners to collaborate. About this, I have two comments. First, the best partners are the ones who are actually interested in working with you. Make sure you are offering something that interests them, do some research before, check what they have published and what they might be good at. Collaborative journalism is about trust, radical sharing, and availability. If some of these things do not exist, there is no successful collaboration. And second, people who can contribute with something that you don't have. Data skills, being a different part of the world, having different sources or access. The other question was, suggest to a younger reporter who wants to start investigating. For someone who's starting now, learning something about spreadsheets and how to get public records in your region is always something valuable to offer in any team. Practice whatever you learn in a project. It doesn't matter if it's a short project, one blog post, one video for TikTok, a newsletter. The best way to learn is to do it. When you're looking up for a specific story, look up companies that are showing off on the internet. Nowadays, everybody's talking on podcasts, on YouTube, conferences. And it's always interesting to look up these people who are showing off, because they're usually doing that because they try to hide something about what they do or what the companies do. And read independent news outlets, not just the major newspapers. Attend conferences online like this. There's always something new to learn.
Thank you so much, Luis. So now we're gonna go back. Now I'm gonna start with Luis, then Lilia, then Joseph, and then Bianca. And so I will ask, we have a couple of general questions, so I will just ask two to each of you. So I will start with you, Luis, now. The questions that people have asked is, can you elaborate how AI has supported your investigations? And if there are any particular topics or areas that you would like to dig next. So let's start with Luis.
To be honest, in this specific project, we didn't use AI. Maybe we use it like ChatGPT to check some code when we were cross-referencing data, but that was all. I don't remember like a very complex use of AI. I think like I don't work for ICIJ. I don't know exactly what they are doing, but I'm always using this data from environmental sections. They are useful for several stories. So one of the things that I have been looking up is environmental crime in indigenous areas, because it's something that is not really covered. Some independent news outlets cover it in Brazil, but not the major newspapers in Brazil. So I think looking up for this kind of environmental crime and how people from other countries benefit and explore indigenous communities in Brazil is something that you can also find in this database that I presented. You can find like, of course, you won't find the whole story, but you can see the starting point of a story in that database.
Thank you, Luis. Now I will go with Lilia. So we have a couple of assistants of people from the Middle East and North Africa. We have a couple of journalists asking questions. So one of the questions is, as journalists from the Middle East and North Africa that want to collaborate with Latin American journalists, what issues do you think that could be investigated together transnationally?
Nothing, only I think in maybe the language, but if all speak in English, maybe it's very, very easy to do. Sometimes the time to works because it's a very different time zones. It's hard to work with. For example, in my case, Mexico, it's 8 or 9 hours the difference between my colleagues in Europe. And sometimes it's like I need to answer quickly, or I need to sleep more, or I need to wake up very early because I need to work with my team. But sometimes and the difference between the sources, because for example in Latin America, obtain documents or files or access to different files sometimes it's very hard to obtain, and maybe it's the same situation in that countries, or and I don't know, maybe it's worst and needs to have a lot of work and work in several months, sorry. But I think and it's curious because sometimes I saw the same topics, for example, the politicians, very corruptus, very politicians are the same, corruption, launder money, smuggling, and I think it's very similar, the culture of the politicians in that cases, and maybe it's very, very possible to do a work with that teams. Write me, no, mail me.
Thank you, Lilia. I would like to ask the same to Joseph. Like, what topics do you think maybe Middle Eastern journalists and Latin American journalists could work together? And also, what topics are you trying to dig in next, Joseph, you and the Armando Info team?
Yeah, I've seen that some methodologies that we have used in order to investigate illicit gold smuggling from Venezuela to some other countries through our neighbors, it is happening also in Africa in the same way. Actually, we found a case that it's very difficult to investigate how some Venezuelan gold ended up in Uganda. And in an opportunity, we were looking for allies there. So, but talking about cooperation, collaboration, I would like to remark what Lilia said about the protection of the sources and what Luis said about the trust. Collaboration is based in trust. At the beginning, when we participated at the beginning with ICIJ, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, I have to acknowledge, to confess you that it was so weird for me to sign an agreement. Now I understand. The trust begins with an agreement if you don't know people. In Latin America, we are not accustomed to that, but it would be a good beginning.
Thank you, Joseph. Finally, Bianca, like I want to ask the same question because people want to know, like, what of the wrongdoings you think are similar? Where do you see opportunities for collaboration? And also, if you can tell us more about your next ideas for investigations. Are you going to stay in the same topic, or do you want to go into something different?
Yeah, I think, and like Joseph was saying with illegal mining, there are so many parallels. I'm not sure about North Africa, but I know that in other African countries, the mechanisms are the same. And we know a lot about these mechanisms because there have been companies that have been investigated for the same type of illegal gold machinery. So we know how it happens, and we know that it is replicated in many different parts of the world. So I think there is a lot of opportunity to collaborate with colleagues from the DRC, for example. There's a lot of regulations, and this is something that really caught my attention when we were doing the investigation. There's a lot of attention, and there's been regulation in the US regarding illegal mining from the DRC, and there have been even laws that are passed to regulate how companies deal with companies in the DRC, because it's considered to be a conflict region, and the way that gold ends up financing armed conflict is something that there's a lot of attention to it in the DRC. But why is there not the same type of attention when it comes to how illegal mining funds illegal criminal organizations in Colombia or in Ecuador, where illegal mining is becoming a greater problem? And those are questions that I don't really have the answer to, and I think that having more international collaboration can help. In terms of topics that I'm looking to investigate more about, I think that there's a big problem with the carbon credit certifications, and that's something that really interests me. I think that, like Luis was talking about, the environmental crimes in indigenous communities, and I think that carbon crediting is something that an industry that is very clearly has a lot of opportunity for fraud, and I think that that's something that I would like to learn more about and look into. And these are, again, stories that have supply chain, links to Europe or to North Africa and the Middle East or to the US. So I think those environmental crimes are very good opportunities for collaboration.
Excellent, Bianca. Thank you so much. Now I will pass the word to Carlos.
Thank you, Andrea. Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Before we close, I would like to thank the Global Investigative Journalism Network and all of you, our audience today. And a very big thanks to our speakers, Bianca. Thank you, Joseph, the same. Lilia and Luis Fernando, thank you. Thank you so much for your participation. Some of you asked me in private about the free course about how to investigate environmental crimes in the Amazon, focus in Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia. I'm going to share again the link into the chat box. And finally, we'll be sure to watch GIJN's Twitter feeds at GIJN and the website for details on future events. Once again, thank you all and goodbye. Nos
Thanks.
vemos luego.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.